My two symbols were infinity, which comes from this loop in the first collage we made, and blue, which is written here and around everywhere else. And so this is what I created. It's made out of paper mache and acrylic paint with some glitter and some blue lights. So what through like all of the research and exhibits and museums that we visited, the one moment that like stayed with me the most was the Tibetan monks making the mandala out of sand and just like washing it away. And it was, our tour guide told us that it was to represent the impermanence of life. And I've, through like conversations with a bunch of people, I've heard that some people are scared of death, others think it's beautiful, and etc. And like infinity or eternity or something like that, it can be somewhat overwhelming or scary, or at the same time beautiful. So I tried showing those two contrasts in my artwork. So with the lights, it shows kind of like either it's glowing or it's shadowy. You don't really know unless you feel it, if it's shadowy or like gloomy for you or like shining for you or something like that. And also the color blue it was once considered a warm color, so that's also another contrast of like warmth being comfort and coldness being discomfort. And so blue can either be how, if you're feeling to infinity, eternity, or the impermanence of life, that it's comforting or discomforting. And the glitter was just like my touch to it, because I find it like beautiful that we're all gonna die. And
wow.
Thank you.
So my symbol was the mountain, and I wasn't really expecting to get this symbol, but in the end, I kind of see how the mountain actually connected back to me. Because when I was making my collage, I was thinking about how I was very interested in like Buddhism and Asia in general, and so I wasn't expecting to get a for someone else to like see a lot of peaks or mountains in the collage. But then in the end, the Buddhism part, it just came back to me. And while I was researching about the mountain, I learned about like the cosmic mountain, and what that is like cosmic. It means like something that is like connected to heaven and earth. And I learned that in the East, so there are people who are very interested in mountains because they like believe that the higher you go, the more connected you are to the heavens. And what I found interesting was that in the West, some have thought of mountains as like creations that like scarred the face of the earth, or like they saw it as like something fractured and imperfect, and like something that like destroyed an otherwise symmetrical world. And like in the end, I came up with like my own meaning of like a mountain. I like something I found beautiful about the mountain is that whether people like look up to it or like worship the mountain or something, or whether people think a mountain is like imperfect or like scarred the face of the earth, the mountain is still gonna remain, and it's not going to like, the mountain is like indifferent or like doesn't care about how people perceive it. The mountain is going to stay, and it's just a peaceful figure that will always remain in nature.
Wow.
It was something that I typed on my typewriter last night, and it says, Dear old friend, Ami, you are so very special to me. You told me once that you think we are very old friends despite meeting a mere 2 weeks ago. You, Elskling, are the fourth mother of Eris and the most beautiful soul. I hope this helps you see that. Love always, Amelia. And then I put the poem I wrote when she did the poetry workshop. And it says, Wisdom is the most beautiful quality. It is what we hear when we ask life, are you there? Fulfillment is what the heart searches for and passions fuel. Is it unattainable? Deep in your mind, heart, and soul. Put back so I don't forget. Okay, so my symbol is the woman, and I think my medium is very important to me when it comes to my symbol because my mother is a filmmaker, and as I've come into my own as a woman and as an artist, I've realized that it's also something that I really enjoy to use to express myself because there's so many aspects. There's the audio, there's the visual, and I think a lot can be communicated through film. And I'm very meticulous, so I like the editing part, and I like that I get to be in control of how it turns out usually. And when I was thinking about what the woman means to me, I was reminded of how special I think Eris is and how inspiring the mothers of Eris are to me, and how I think Ami is such a wonderful role model and a very hard worker. So I decided I would do a tribute to her and to Eris with this piece, and even my typewriter, my typewriter was a gift from my mother because she is an artist and she has raised me around artists my whole life, and her friend Maya Stein is a poet, and we used to write poetry together on her typewriter, and I wanted one so badly. So when I was like 10, that was my gift from Santa. I was like, I want a typewriter, and she got it for me, and it was like the most mind-blowing thing in the world, and it takes a lot of upkeep still. I like it a lot, and I'm glad I got to incorporate these things in my piece, and it's very personal to me, so it's a little nerve-wracking to share because I feel very exposed, but I think that's what art is for. Questions and comments? Oh, also the music was composed by my mom for her third movie. So there's a piece of my mom in there as well.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So my symbol was tangled lines or thread, and I came up with that symbol through my collage, which had a lot of lines and thread and cross hatching, and also a lot of words. So while I chose thread as my symbol, I later found that the words were very much a part of the thread, so they ended up supporting each other. So when I was doing my research, I found that language and storytelling through history and a lot of different cultures has been deeply connected to weaving, sewing, textiles. The word text and textile share a common root, and so there's kind of been this tradition of storytelling and carrying on culture and language during weaving and sewing and creating cloth and textiles. So I combined them together, and I made a video where I have a line tangling to the sound of voices. And another reason this was done this way is because when I was making my collage, I had a very strong feeling that this collage had a noise. When I look at it, I hear sounds in my head. And I feel like that a lot of times with the tangled lines, it's something that I draw a lot. It's kind of like a little, it's been a symbol for me for a while. I just haven't looked into it, and I thought it was just me being random when I didn't know what to draw. But actually, whenever I draw these tangled lines, I hear sounds that go along with the way the line moves. So I did a line with the audio over it, and the line kind of moves with the audio. And I used my iPhone camera to record myself drawing the line, and then Amelia did the vocals for it. The words come from a poem that she wrote that I chopped up and reconstructed and had her read in little bits, and I layered them on top of each other, so you can't hear everything that's being said, but you can hear some things, and there's kind of this mystery and this effect that you get from that. So yeah, that's my project.
So my symbol is body, and I remember when I first created my collage, I didn't really create it to have a symbolic meaning. It was just what I was thinking. And when we talked to the, I think she was a social worker, I forgot, but we talked to her and she said that like I had a lot of birds and nature in my picture, my collage, and so I ended up with 3 symbols at first, which was face, body, and bird. So I scratched face and bird, and I dived into the body. So when we went to the Rubin Museum, we saw a whole bunch of goddesses who, like, I just like the way their figure was and what they represented, which was like nature, and their purpose was to help people, and that was like that gave me a lot of inspiration in what I want to do for my final piece. So I think it was the 8th day I started sketching her, and she represents nature because like I thought of her with like her brown skin and her green hair as like a tree, and I did like a mini baby version of her, which is like, yeah, she represents the tree more. And I don't know, like I used paint, like watercolor, and I used Copic markers, clay pods. I used a lot of materials, and I just want to incorporate like the aspect of nature within my piece. And yeah. So originally these sunflowers I was supposed to cut out and paste them on this piece because I had so much like white space. But I ended up like making it this own piece, and I kind of like the way it turned out. Yeah. Questions, comments, concerns?
Was the Chelsea trip, do you remember that female figure?
Oh, yes, I forgot to talk about her. I'm sorry. But yeah, there was this, we went to the galleries in Chelsea, and we saw like this life-size like sculpture of Eve and how she was like supposed to look. And that like gave me so much inspiration. And I was like, I wanna incorporate that into my art piece. And I took a lot of inspiration from that. And yeah, that helped me a lot. Especially even looking at all the galleries. I just felt drawn to all the pieces. And I was like, I wanna do that someday. Yeah.
And so the Eve that was at the gallery, often when we see Eve represented, she looks like lighter skin, blonde hair, sort of Eurocentric definition of beauty historically. But this Eve was like
Defining stereotypes, like defining.
Realistic.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
And I love that. So I was like, instead of like creating something that was basic and like your ideal version of beauty, I'm gonna switch that and make this like my ideal version of beauty.
Wonderful. Yeah. I think
So my symbol was rainbows and fragments. When we made the collages, I didn't really go anywhere with an idea. I just picked like colorful images and then arranged them into a rainbow. And so when I was doing that, I didn't realize that, oh, this is going to be my symbol. Okay. So doing research, I found that the rainbow has lots of meanings. It could be like for part of the LGBTQ movement, they would use the rainbows as like a way of symbolizing all the different ways to love, I guess. Some people found it as a bridge to heaven, from earth to heaven, and then others saw it as like a fearsome thing, like a snake, and that it would eat you if you went into it. Fragments, on the other hand, I associated with like glass. So, and then I looked up mirrors, and there's a superstition where if you break a mirror, then you get 7 years bad luck. So, this is my piece.
I love
Here. So, another thing I also was realizing was there was a piece in the galleries that had these pieces of wood, and they would all like kind of splinter off, and it just popped out, and that's what I kind of wanted to replicate in here. So there's many different types of things, like origami paper cranes, paper chains, the mirror, marbles, other stuff. And so what I wanted to represent was not really one thing, but how you would want to interpret it, and kind of the exploration and find stuff like I did in Harris. And that's it.
So my symbol was honey, and to beginning the process, we did the collage, and I used a lot of warm colors to like surround whatever I was like putting onto the paper. And in the middle, I had a lot of like images that had to do with religion or like or luxury. So of course, no one would automatically turn to honey. Like that had no correlation. However, looking into those things, you can find a little bit of the aspects of honey into it. There's a little bit of luxury, like a majesty, a queen bee, and warmth, because the color yellow or the golden color can also perceive like comfort or being close and together, and purity, of course, like something sacred. And in many cultures, like the Sumerians and Indians, they fed honey to the gods or like newborn rulers, and that would show that their immortality. So going to the cloisters and the Reuben, I was able to like look into the religious side of honey, and I really saw the sacredness of like what like the bees were producing, and I really fell in love with just a sugary substance.
Wonderful.
So my symbol is birds. Originally my first symbol was gonna be orange and blue, but since after researching, I found out that there was a bird called kingfisher that was orange and blue, and I thought that my project was gonna be about surrounded about that idea first. But then I found that other birds had other meanings, and I wanted to incorporate that. And for example, I did the blue jay, which represents curiosity, the kingfisher that represents prosperity and peace, and the toucan that represents showmanship. And the crow that represents mystery and mischievous, the eagle that represents leadership, the owl that represents wisdom. And this inspired me because like everybody's different, big, they come in all different sizes and shapes, which is like really good. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
So my symbol is water, and I got that the first day when I was in this program. So here is my collage that we did in the first day. I didn't find it out, so Arlie told me that I have a lot of water in my collage because you can see it's from like it forms a line there. This is a waterfall, and then this picture and this picture. So I decided that maybe I'm gonna do something related to water. But then what I didn't like, she told me that when you look into your collage, there's a lot of roundness in your collage. So I cut each edges to like a round thing. So maybe you like circle. I was like, yeah, I like circle. That's what I like. Yeah. So, and then you can also see my art piece. Like there's a lot of circle in there, like this mirror circle and then the container circle, and then they sit in a circle. So that's why I kind of incorporated that in my art piece. So, okay, so let's talk about water. So, water is kind of like, so in our language, you often relate water to like an environment thing. So like for example, like you're in deep water and then something like that. So it's a part of nature. So I was thinking maybe I can create something that's because nature often relates to religion. Because people in ancient times, like all the early settlements are next to the river, so that's why they like prosper. Okay, I can't say English right now, but like yeah. So okay, and then I was thinking maybe I would do something related to religion, because in my collage there's also some religious aspect in it. So when we're doing research on that day, there's one line really inspired me. It was in the Encyclopedia of Religion. It says water is always is usually related to feminine. So I was thinking, oh, I should do some goddesses related to water. And here are my 3 goddesses here. This one is tiny, maybe you can't see them. I'll just take it out first. So this is the artist. This is the goddess I found in I got inspiration from the Metropolitan Museum. There's a lot of Buddha there. So this is a female Buddha, like a watery female Buddha, I would say. I created for it. And then this one represents the Nile River in the Egyptian world. So it's another culture different from the one from the Eastern world. And then this one is represent the holy water in the Western world. So it's in Bible. So these are my 3 culture, and then they sit in a circle. So I'm thinking how circle can relate to water, and then my thought is that water is endless like a circle, and then it's part of what we belong to. So we have to have that respect toward nature, as we described earlier. So, and then you can see I use a glass container to contain my goddesses, because I think glass. I have a special feeling toward glass, because I feel it's pure, it has reflection like water does. So it's kind of help you to see yourself. I think that's kind of part of why I choose glasses and mirrors in my collage, in my art piece. So yeah.
Wow. Yay.
So, as most of you know, I missed the first day of ARIS sadly because I had a psych evaluation. I'm fine. So, the second day, on Tuesday, I was pulled into a different room and asked to do a collage because that was done on Monday, which I missed. And I was just sat in a room full of different reference photos and a thing, and they just said the actual prompt was pick images that speak to you. But I misinterpreted that, or I didn't hear it, because when I had the paper, my first thought was, I saw an image of James Franco and Bryan Cranston, and I was like, ooh, here's an idea that's been in my head for a while. I want to talk about the kind of corruption of creative ideas in Hollywood, because nowadays you don't really see anything too provocative. It's always either a Marvel movie, it's either a Marvel movie or just something that that has all the means to be something new and doesn't even try. So I was doing that, and then she said, well, that's great, not the prompt. So I was like, ooh, and then I felt bad, and I scrapped it, and then this was made in 10 minutes. But So I didn't use James Franco or Bryan Cranston, even though I kind of wish I had. But another image that spoke to me was the spider. I saw that and immediately thought, fear. That's fear. This is just supposed to represent how like our perspectives or our understandings or our wants change in life. And then on the sideline is these two spiders representing fear. And after talking to Ami, she she told me that in a lot of cultures, the spider, being afraid of spiders is something just like, how to say it, everyone is kind of afraid of spiders. They're a little creepy if you haven't noticed. But in a lot of cultures, they also represent weaving and creativity, or not creativity, as a creator. And as soon as I heard the word creator, I was like, oh, I'm an animation student, so characters and ideas are very important to me, and I prefer that they be done to the creator's wishes, and not like a studio who has its own like goals and like ideas for money. So as soon as I drew the connection between spiders and animators / creators, I thought that's what I want to talk about. And then if a spider represents creativity, my symbol would be a dead spider. Edgy. But so my research was mostly just it went into I forgot where. It's a country in Africa that created a staff. It was basically a staff. Côte d'Ivoire. And it was a staff with a spider, and it was held by their like high-ranking officials. And the spider in that culture was based on a legend called Anansi. Anansi, a spider who was known as a trickster and a hero, like Loki, but not as well, to give you some perspective, a joke Loki thought was funny was pushing a guy into a portal that made him fall forever. So this is a little... Infinity. Yeah. So this is a little... He was maybe a little lighter. And this legend was regarded as kind of heroic, and also a creator and a weaver. And so that just kind of strengthened the idea I already had. And then I think more recently when we went to the Morgan Museum, what was our tour guide? Dr. Babcock. He showed me a cylinder seal of a spider, and I was like, oh, I want to know the what these people thought of spiders. But it was just another, like, they're creators, they're weavers. I'm like, oh, well, I wish, like, I was kind of disappointed because that was most of it, like, they're creators and weavers. But he also showed me the scorpion, and the scorpion is probably more feared than the spider, because one sting from that is a little more lethal. And so I think we all have, even I, like, didn't expect any more from this scorpion, and I thought, oh, that also probably represents danger. And he said it actually represents fertility, because a scorpion will carry its young on its back, and that, like, shocked me. I could never expect that from a scorpion. And I guess there's kind of this duality to something can be seen as evil or bad, but it can also be seen as, like, positive or nurturing. And I think that can also be said of creators. Like, they can be seen as, like, you have someone like Frank Miller who starts out like a very, very impressive writer, and then kind of ages into this racist, sexist guy. But then you also have people who have always been like kind of like feared for their ideas, like Alan Moore, who deep down have something important to say that gets kind of shut down by people who are like, that's kind of not following our bottom line. And so it was always this idea between like judging something before you have the entire or everything that creates it. And that's basically the history or the kind of story of how I created the idea for a dead spider. And if you can kind of see a little closely, I'm not going to try and like lure it away. It is Spider-Man, the hand. And that actually comes from another idea that I had like months ago of Spider-Man being kind of a character that studios have kind of dissected to become very adjacent to what he was created to be. Mostly through Sony and the Andrew Garfield movies. If you don't know, it was directed by Mark Webb, and he was very happy to like get this project because it's a dream come true. Andrew Garfield was excited to play him. Everyone was excited for this. It was supposed to be a reboot, but a lot of Sony executives, including one named Avi Arad, thought Sony as a company, they kind of think more about money, and I guess they're a corporation, but also I think because of that bottom line and because there was no actual heart in those movies, or heart to making those movies, they were just thinking, how can we make this something that young people, not knowing that young people already enjoy Spider-Man, that young people will flock to. How do we reach them? And I guess a lot of that was that CEO Avi Arad just thought, well, let's basically he had his own ideas of how to make the movie, and instead of giving Mark Webb notes, he kind of took over the entire project, making a lot of the things Mark Webb was trying to do kind of muffled. He kind of polluted the art piece, if you would say. And I thought that was very sad because everyone who worked on that movie was very excited, and because of this kind of corporate bottom line, it was polluted. So I wanted to include him, and I feel like this is still happening with the character, at least in, not the current times. So I wanted him to be a representation of something beautiful, something creative, something that we can see two sides of, being polluted as well as a spider being killed. And I was gonna name this piece "I Killed a Spider," but I thought I don't want to be too edgy. It was always that I didn't want to be too edgy. I didn't want to I wanted to be provocative, just not oh, that guy. So I named it after Anansi, the spider of legend, and because he was heroic and Spider-Man is heroic, I thought that also kind of correlated. So the piece itself, I'll just take it off.
Oh, please don't drop it.
Maybe that's the real thing I'm gonna. So I never got a chance to glue down the spider, but it is a simple dead spider. There's a web right here for its creation, and it's kind of fallen into his hand because they both kind of found themselves through their own situations at the end of their life. Questions, comments, major concerns?
I love your negative, positive, just bringing arrows or symbols back in again. They have that. They have both negative and positive, and that's so clear what you have been doing.
And the connection to mythology
and
is so great.
And I love how you made that first collage, which came from you, and the second collage also came from you, and through the course of your project, the collages ended up speaking to one another. Your symbols found each other.